Sometime in the past year, inside a data center owned by a company that mostly delivers noodles and groceries, 50,000 domestically manufactured chips fired up in parallel, and did not stop until a 1.6 trillion parameter model was sitting, trained on the other side. No Nvidia, no H100, no imported silicon of any kind. The run completed. Hold that fact for exactly 1 second before the asterisks arrive, because the asterisks are where the real story lives. The headline is that it worked. What the headline quietly skips is the wattage, the yield, and the undisclosed wall clock time that would tell you what worked actually cost. By the end of this, you will understand why the same number, 50,000 chips, reads as a triumph and a warning depending entirely on which column of the spreadsheet you examine first. Meituan confirmed the run. They confirmed the parameter count. They confirmed the chip count. What they did not confirm, and what no independent party has verified, is throughput per chip, effective floating point utilization, or how the wall clock training time compares to what a Western cluster of equivalent scale would have taken. It completed and it completed comparably are two different claims, and only one of them has been made. 1.6 trillion parameters places this training run in the same rough order of magnitude as the largest publicly disclosed Western models. That is the number that earns the headline. But Meituan is, at its core, a food delivery and local commerce platform. The fact that this infrastructure belongs to them and not to a dedicated hyperscaler is itself a signal about where capital is flowing inside China's technology sector right now. 50,000 chips running in coordinated parallel is roughly equivalent to wiring together every personal computer in a mid-sized European city and convincing all of them to agree on a single calculation at the same instant. The coordination problem alone is not trivial. If you stack the server racks housing that many chips end to end, the row would run longer than 40 football fields. That is the physical footprint of one training run, before you account for power and cooling. The run completed. Now ask the next question. Completed at what density and compared to what? The leading Nvidia data center chips, the H100 and its successor family, are built on process nodes that, by most analyst estimates and public production disclosures from major foundries, sit at or near the current manufacturing frontier. Domestic Chinese competitors are generally estimated to trail by 1 to 2 process generations, though exact figures remain contested and no independent fab audit of the leading Chinese foundries has been published. That gap matters because density determines how much compute you can extract from a given physical area, which determines how many chips you need to match a given workload. At equivalent parameter counts, a less dense chip requires more physical units to do the work of a denser one. The precise ratio is not published. Reports from analysts covering the Chinese semiconductor sector suggest the chip count multiple needed to match a Western frontier cluster could range from 1.5 times to 3 times or more. These are estimates, not audited benchmarks. What Meituan chose, 50,000 chips, may reflect the minimum required, or it may reflect the maximum available. That distinction has not been disclosed. Think of chip density like fuel efficiency. 2 trucks can both complete the same cross-country haul. One burns 40 gallons, one burns 90. The delivery happened. The economics are not the same. More chips means more physical space. More physical space means more power draw. And the power figure is the number nobody put in the press release. This is where I think the framing almost everywhere has gone wrong. The efficiency gap here is structural, not temporary. The leading domestic chips are built on nodes that trail the current frontier by at least 1 to 2 generations, by most analyst estimates. That gap does not disappear through software optimization. You cannot compile your way out of a lithography constraint. The thermal load per useful floating point operation is higher by physics, not by insufficient effort. Power consumption figures for this training run have not been disclosed. That is standard practice. Virtually no company publishes training run energy costs voluntarily. But at lower chip density, the energy cost per useful operation is higher, and that cost compounds across every subsequent run. Yield compounds it further. The percentage of chips that emerge from a fabrication line fully functional is lower at advanced nodes, and by most reports, currently lower still at domestic Chinese fabs attempting to push toward those nodes. Lower yield means higher costs per working chip. Neither Meituan nor its chip suppliers have disclosed yield figures. A processor node is like a city grid. A denser grid moves more traffic through the same space with less fuel burned per mile. A coarser grid still works, traffic still moves, but you need more roads, more land, and more fuel per trip. The city functions. Its operating budget is different. Running 50,000 lower efficiency chips generates more aggregate heat than running a smaller number of higher efficiency ones at equivalent compute. That is what thermal load means at scale, and cooling infrastructure is not free. The thermal bill is the price of the wall that became a map. The strongest counter-arguments deserve a direct answer before I close. 3 of them are legitimate. First, software closes the gap faster than hardware timelines suggest. Chinese research labs have demonstrated genuine gains in memory bandwidth utilization and model parallelism that extract more useful compute from each chip. The raw node gap number overstates the effective performance gap, and that is supported by publicly available model performance data. Second, scale changes the economics. If domestic chip production volumes rise, yield improves and unit cost falls. The current cost structure reflects an early production penalty, not a permanent ceiling. Major foundry cost curves have followed exactly this trajectory before. Third, the West's efficiency advantage depends on specific foundries and equipment suppliers remaining accessible and cooperative. Export controls are not a one-way ratchet. Supply chain concentration is a risk that cuts in both directions. All 3 are real. The software argument has evidence behind it. The scale argument has historical precedent. The supply chain argument is the most structurally important and the least near-term. Together they say, the efficiency gap is real today, and its permanence is not guaranteed, but closing it requires years, capital, and political conditions that do not yet exist. The export restriction that removed Nvidia from Meituan's supply chain did not freeze the training run. It redirected the engineering effort toward domestic alternatives and forced an infrastructure build that now exists and cannot be unbuilt. That is genuinely new. A frontier-scale training run is achievable without Western silicon. That proof is permanent. The thermal constraint is the new ceiling. Every watt above the efficiency frontier is the cost of that independence. The thermal bill is what the map costs to use, right now, at this moment in the industry's history. And here's the part I find most interesting to sit with. The bullish read and the bearish read are not in tension. They are the same fact, read at 2 different temperatures. China has demonstrated that a frontier-scale training run is achievable without Western hardware. The cost structure of achieving it is also, right now, genuinely unsustainable at hyperscaler margins. Both things are true simultaneously, and the export control that made the first fact necessary also made the second fact unavoidable for now. My read is that this is the most important artificial intelligence infrastructure story in China that almost no one is framing correctly. The capability proof is not the news. The news is that the cost structure of that proof reveals exactly how far the domestic ecosystem still has to travel, and that the travel is now mandatory because the alternative supplier is no longer available. The restriction became the map. The map is real. The terrain on it is harder than the headline suggests, and the distance to the destination is measured in watts. The thermal bill is what independence costs at this moment in history. That number will fall. It has not fallen yet. 50,000 chips proved it can be done. The power meter is still running. If you were allocating capital inside a Chinese technology company right now, would you bet on the software optimization path, closing this efficiency gap, or on the domestic fabrication timeline? Drop your reasoning below. I want to see where this community actually lands on that question. If you want explainers that go past the press release, subscribe and turn on notifications. That is the only thing this channel does.